It's my privilege as Deputy Leader of the Council to present the Wives Support Group with this cheque for £450.
I love you, you bastard! I love you, you scum! A lie is a lie! And she's telling lies! Order! The honourable member will withdraw from this house!
And these are all rented out to claimants. Multiple occupation.
Yeah? With the rents guaranteed by the DHSS? Are potential gold mines?
I think I can help you, Terry.
Where are we going?
Oh, we're home, man, Felix. You're home.
We don't live here.
He said he'd probably go on having depressions for a long time. Don't worry.
1, 2, 3.
Will you marry me?
Say yes.
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 Hello and welcome to this BFI at-home discussion to celebrate the 25th anniversary since the original transmission of Our Friends in the North. I actually watched it when it first went out in early 1996 and then again on BrickBox during the first lockdown, and boy, does it hold up well. Our Friends in the North is now universally acknowledged to be one of the finest and most important state-of-the-nation dramas ever made in this country. It also launched the careers of its 4 principal actors, Christopher Eccleston, Gina McKee, Mark Strong and Daniel Craig, turning them overnight almost into household names. This BAFTA-winning series was voted one of the top 100 TV shows of all time in a BFI poll. But as we'll hear in a moment, the writer Peter Flannery had to fight tooth and nail to get it onto the screen. Our Friends in the North began as a stage play for the Royal Shakespeare Company in 1982. It was loosely inspired, I think, as Peter will tell us, by Shakespeare's Henry IV. The TV series was extended to 9 episodes in order to follow the lives of the 4 friends over the course of some 3 decades. Costing £8 million and taking over a year to film, it was at the time one of the most expensive and ambitious drama series the BBC had ever attempted. It remains a gripping piece of long-form TV storytelling that manages to combine the personal and the political, and it's often regarded as the bridge between the era of the single television play and the richly complex long-form TV dramas that we now all enjoy. So I'm delighted to welcome our panel to discuss the series. Christopher Eccleston, a BAFTA nominated for his performance as Nicky in Our Friends from the North, a role that really established him. Christopher is also well known as the 9th incarnation of Doctor Who and for his collaborations with filmmakers Danny Boyle, Michael Winterbottom, and in roles in Shallow Grave, Jude, 24-Hour Party People and 28 Days Later, and many, many other TV credits. Too many to mention, but I will say Cracker, Clocking Off, The Second Coming, and Christopher won an Emmy for his role in the Jimmy McGovern series, The Accused. We also have Peter Flannery, the screenwriter. Peter was a resident playwright at the Royal Shakespeare Company in the late 70s and 80s before going on to write for TV. Apart from Our Friends in the North, which would lead him to winning the honorary Dennis Potter Award for outstanding achievement in TV writing, Peter also adapted Alan Hunter's Inspector Gently novels for BBC One, produced by Company Pictures, reuniting him with producer Charlie Pattinson, who's also on the panel. Inspector George Gently ran for 8 series. In 2008, Peter Flannery created and wrote the epic historical series The Devil's Whore for Channel 4, and then he followed it up in 2014 with another series, New Worlds. Charlie Pattinson produced Our Friends in the North. Charlie began at the Royal Court Theatre before moving to the BBC, where he became a producer in the drama department. In 1998, he and George Faber set up their own independent production company, Company Pictures, which produced a number of notable award-winning series and one-offs such as Shameless, The Life and Death of Peter Sellers, Skins, Elizabeth I, Talk to Me, and Wild at Heart. Charlie is currently CEO of a high-end TV drama and film production company, New Pictures, which has also produced a number of award-winning shows such as Des, The Deceived, and White House, A Farm. Welcome to all of you. Let me start with you, Peter. Why don't you briefly tell us about the genesis of the show and why it didn't nearly get made? Because it was quite hairy, wasn't it?
It was, and that in itself is a bit of a saga. So I'll try and keep it to I'll keep it to one episode, shall I? It was, as you mentioned, I was a resident playwright of the Royal Shakespeare Company in the early '80s and writing plays for them and watching. I had the freedom of the organisation really, so I could go and watch anything the company was doing. They happened to be doing that huge season of the histories around that time, all of the Henrys, for instance, and the Richards. And so I was just nipping in and out of those. And the only thing I had to do for my year there as the resident playwright was to write them a play at some point. And I thought, well, I can't write a two-hander after all of this. I have to write something that's appropriate for the Royal Shakespeare Company. And where do you get the chance to work with huge casts? So, you know, it was an invitation to write a huge play. So I wrote Our Friends in the North as a kind of modern chronicle play, chronicling the life and times of the nation in the 60s and 70s. And it turned out to be about corruption, because for the simple reason that I wanted to answer the question, why do I feel quite optimistic about the political process in this country? But my parents' generation, who grew up in the 20s and 30s, are very, very suspicious and negative of it. And whenever I asked them or their cohort what that was about, the word corruption kept coming up. And so I started to look at corruption in British public life. And I was a bit of an innocent. I mean, if you'd asked me then, do you think there is corruption in the Metropolitan Police Force? I would have said, no, I don't think so. Sadly, you would struggle to find anybody in the country now who would answer the question in the same way.
And is it true that you actually pitched the story to Alan Yentob at one point as a series about housing policy when he turned it down?
Well, I do sometimes get a bit mixed up about what I'm doing, and it depends what I'm asked. I mean, this is Michael Waring's fault, who was producing it at that point. And Michael was brilliant at sniffing out talent and shows, but absolutely hopeless at telling you what was going on. So I met him for a drink in a bar in London. We were chatting, and in walks Yentob. I don't know whether that was deliberate or not by arrangement. It wasn't arranged with me. So we were sitting talking, and Waring Julie says to Alan, Peter's got this great serial, you know, that we should do. And Alan said, oh yeah, what's that about? And I went, it's really about post-war British social housing policy.
And he didn't buy it. I should mention that Alan Yentob was controller of BBC Two at the time. I mean,
wasn't a great pitch.
Yeah, I mean, Charlie, Michael Waring did play a huge role, though, didn't he, in championing the series and getting it past all the opposition?
Yeah, because the hard thing as a producer, or the really skill, is spotting the material, is spotting the writer, is spotting the talent, and knowing that that's going to make a great piece of television. And that's the thing that Michael did. You know, Michael went to the theatre, he saw this play by a writer he'd never written for television before, and said, this could be a really great serial, and this is a really great writer. And he was, that's what producing is really all about. And that's what Michael did. You know, and you know, that's, you know, is really, really significant. That's proper producing. What I did was less significant in a way, because you know, I came to the project when, you know, Peter had already done a substantial amount of the work into turning it into a serial, but happened to be caught in a kind of corporate turf war at the BBC, a sort of generational turf war, if you like. Whereas Michael Waring at this point, I think, was probably running drama serials department and was kind of entrenched in sort of warfare with a kind of new generation of commissioning editors who just didn't trust each other. And I was caught in the middle of this, you know, in a way, because I loved this show, which I wanted to get made, but at the same time, so I sort of, you know, had to navigate myself through this turf war, really. So that's kind of where I found myself. But to go right back to the beginning, yes, Michael Waring, you know, did the real producing job right at the very beginning of the process.
Now, Christopher, I mean, were you aware from the start, though, that you were involved in something really unique and special? And did the character of Nikki chime with you immediately when you read the script?
Yeah, I mean, from a generational point of view, I think I'd felt that I could become an actor because of British television. There wasn't a culture, really. I wasn't taken to the theatre by my school or by my mum and dad. We'd go to the cinema as a treat in summer holidays, but the television was always there. And the television at that point was very writer-led. And what Charlie's just been talking about is I think, is the coming of the accountants and the execs who create shows for an audience according to research. Whereas I watched the plays for today. I watched the Monday play. I watched the Wednesday play. That propelled me into drama school. And when I came out of drama school, which my training was very much writer-led, you know, you studied Shakespeare, you studied Ibsen, you studied Strindberg. It was writer. That's my pre-life drama school, and then created that appetite. So I seized on Our Friends in the North. It was what I felt I would do my entire career, really. And yes, I was aware of it. I've said it before. I mean, I read the whole thing in one go, but the moment where I remember saying I have to be in this was when the Felix is savaged by the pit bull. And I knew what Peter was doing there with the story of this old political radical being eaten alive by the new 80s reality. It wasn't a scene, I mean, I get emotional now. It wasn't a scene that I was involved in. It was my father, of course. And I knew that if this was put on television, that scene alone, if they had followed the thread of that character, we would have them. And so it proved.
Chris was the first person we cast. Our first director was Danny Boyle, and Chris had been working with Danny Boyle on Shadow Grave, and he was the very first person we cast in the show.
I can remember being stood on the set next to Danny. He was at the monitor, I was at the monitor, and he said, "Oh, I've seen some scripts that you're gonna go daft for, Chris. You'll go daft for these scripts." That's my Danny Boyle. And I said, what are they? Because we had very similar taste, very similar background. We were born a couple of miles from each other, and that's right, Charlie's right. It was Our Friends in the North, yeah.
And then Danny went off to do something else.
Yeah, unfortunately, Shallow Grave was a huge hit at Cannes that year, and having done about sort of 4 or 5 weeks of pre-production, he withdrew because he had been offered some insignificant script called Train Spotting, I think.
He regrets it now, yeah.
Yeah, regrets it now. Talk us through the rest of the casting. So Chris is the first person you cast, Nikki. I mean, because it is pretty extraordinary that you have this cast of 4 young actors, and they all go on to be, you know, huge names.
Well, my only memory, I'll let someone else talk, is I think we were all fairly unanimous about Gina and Mark. The really difficult one was Daniel, who I remember we got back again and again and again and again, and in a sort of fairly unhelpful way to read for us, and then got him in with a voice coach, and then I remember which was an extraordinary thing for, you know, Daniel at that point was a young actor, had done probably less than anybody else.
He was younger than me and Mark.
Yeah, at that stage.
He was 26.
And I remember I got a call at my house in the evening, and it was Daniel, and he just said, "I've been asked to come back. I'm just telling you, I'm not coming back. You know, I've been back 3 or 4 times. I really want to do this. I'm not being difficult, but you've got enough now to make up your mind whether you want me." And I thought, wow, okay, there's some confidence there. And, you know, that just pushed us over the edge, I think.
But Peter, how was his Geordie accent to start with? Did he have to work on it a lot?
Terrible.
It was pitiful. Yeah, absolutely pitiful. What I don't remember all that stuff, Charlie. What I remember is we were nearly committed to offering the part to a real Geordie actor and a complete unknown. We were on the verge of doing that, and I only saw one tape from Daniel. He was working in Germany or something, and he put himself on tape in a studio. That's all I ever saw, and I thought, I didn't really mind about the accent. I know the accent is difficult, and a decent actor will do a job and pick it up. I thought, so this is a pitiful attempt at the accent, but never mind. I think this guy's going to be a star, is all I remember, because I remember looking at his eyes and his manner, even though he's, you know, he looks like we look to each other now, you know, on these little screens. But I just thought there's something about this bloke. He's going to be memorable, you know. He has got that thing called star quality, which I'm not sure I believed in at that point, but it sort of shone through, you know.
I mean, the auditions were sufficiently variable for us to have to fight quite hard in certain quarters to get him cast. Interestingly, he was it was the most difficult bit of casting.
Christopher, I want to get on to the politics, which is absolutely at the heart of our friends in the North, but it never feels, and I think this is the genius of it, it never feels that you're being preached at because of the way that the personal and the political are intertwined. Can you say something about how that was achieved?
Well, I think quite simply by spending a great deal of time with the characters within their personal as well as their political lives. And with Nikki, of course, you always came back to how much were Nikki's political choices, his direction, about personal moral conviction, and how much was it about trying to get his father's love and attention? And what is it that propels a Jeremy Corbyn-like figure, who you could say I was playing at certain points? How much is it about political conviction and a moral choice, and how much is it about ego and damage? Because you're seeking a platform, aren't you, as a politician?
Okay, did everyone get the press release about the scandal of the Willow Lane flats?
Is it right you support the IRA?
Jesus wept. I don't suppose you'd like to tell me where you're getting all this, as if I didn't know.
Well?
I believe in a united Ireland.
British troops out?
Well, it's difficult to imagine a united Ireland with British troops in it, certainly. Now, can we move on?
It's IRA policy, isn't it?
Look, can we move on to the issues of this campaign, please? Housing, education, childcare, medical provision for this community.
That's IRA policy, isn't it?
I condemn all acts of terrorism from whatever source.
Did you tell your girlfriend that when she got 12 years?
What did I say?
I want to come to you, Peter, because the series charts the decline of the Labour movement in some ways, and the changing values in society from the sort of optimism and collectivism of the 1960s to the share-owning, home-owning, self-reliance of Thatcherism in the 80s. I mean, was that always the core of the project for you, that the human cost of those changing values?
Yes, because that's the meaning of the personal and the political coming together in this particular story. Is that every political decision or every political move is a moral decision or a moral move first in my world. That's the way I see the world. So I tend to see people in those in that way. The other thing was that's important about the way it turned out is that I created the characters for the stage play when I was 28, and I finished writing them for the TV when I was 44. So I created the young people as a relatively young man, and I created the middle-aged people as a well and truly middle-aged man. And a big thing had happened in my writing life after I wrote Our Friends in the North for the stage. I more or less said to myself, I'm not going to ever write like that again. It's very intellectual, the play. There's actually very little of the human touch in it. The characters aren't human and rounded in the way they are in the TV thing. And that, but when I came to write it for TV, I had changed as a writer and was far more interested in people's personal lives and what made them live. And that politics was part of that, but it wasn't the whole thing. And so you got this pretty good mix of the characters going on that journey, which was both personal and political. And I couldn't, as a 44-year-old, I could never have created those characters as well in the early episodes as I had done when I was 28. And nor, of course, when I was 28, could I possibly have imagined quite how sour life might get for me and for everybody else when you go into those. I mean, marriages fall apart, your parents die, you have your own ill health, you have your own longings and your own disappointments to deal with. I didn't have any of that when I was 28. Where that exists in the stage play, it's made up, it's imagined, it's never been felt. But by the time I wrote it, the scripts in the mid-90s, it had more or less all been felt.
Many of the issues the series raises still seem so relevant today. I mean, housing, for instance, Charlie. It's you know, watching it now, it still resonates, doesn't it?
I think tragically that's completely true. Whether it be housing, homelessness, corruption, poverty, you know, it's everything that Peter was writing about really hasn't gone away. No, circumstances are different and the pictures may be different, but yeah.
I mean, Christopher, we see Nikki go over the course of 3 decades from this bright, enthusiastic, radical to disillusioned, cynical academic. I mean, with the benefit now of you being 25 years older, roughly the age period that you travelled in the series, do you understand and share Nikki's frustrations, the older Nikki's frustrations, even more now?
Yeah, completely. To a certain extent, my journey through the industry, the television, film, even theatre industry, there's a parallel. You know, I was so idealistic, and I have to say I retain that, which is why I want to talk about things like this. But I have gone on a similar journey, albeit not in politics, and I've embraced kind of pragmatism. Nikki, of course, in the end, leaves the political stage and becomes a kind of hybrid figure of Don McCullum and John Pilger or somebody like that. So what Peter Flannery just said struck me. You know, at 28, he could not have imagined, and myself, Daniel, Gina, and Mark had to project all that. I don't know how old was Nikki when we left him. How old was he?
50, maybe 50.
Was he? Right, well, I'm 57. So yeah, marriages have fallen apart and careers have been lost and mental health has been lost and reclaimed. And yeah.
But also, Peter, because you'd spent so long with those characters, and I think this is kind of the key to great writing in many ways, and the things that's so rare is that you knew those people, and each of those characters, you know, there's a bit of you in each of them, and you knew them so well. But more importantly, you kind of loved and respected them, which meant that they could do anything. They could behave incredibly badly, which each of them do individually at various points in the story. And yet the audience, you would never lose the audience, and the audience would never lose them, because there was a kind of underlying depth of feeling. and
Yeah, I think that's
understanding.
true.
That's the thing that really makes it unique, I think, and that's the thing which allows or allowed Peter to actually, that's the thing that allowed Peter to make a show about post-war British housing policy.
Yeah.
And for it to connect.
Tosca is key, Mark's performance and Peter's writing of Tosca, because clearly they're not Peter's politics and probably not Mark's, and Tosca could have fallen into one-dimensional, but he's as, you know, the audience loved him just as much as the idealistic Mary, for instance.
Let's talk about Mary, actually, because I totally agree with Tosca, and seeing him turn into this kind of real estate magnate during the Thatcher era is fascinating. But let's talk about Mary as the main female protagonist in this series, played, of course, by Gina McKee. Fantastic arc from downtrodden wife and mother to politician. I mean, Peter, how did you see Mary from the start when you started writing her character?
Well, the character of Mary that I created when I was 28 was a function of the plot. I wanted to write about the awful housing policies. I wanted to write about bad housing. And in order to really dramatize that, you need a victim of it. So let's have a young couple who get stuck in a flat. That's how they got created. And they're not much more than that in the stage version. Once you've got 10 hours instead of 2 hours, in other words, someone's given you all of that time on TV, and you're in your 40s, and you've been around the block a few times, then I think I started off writing Mary. I believe two things about writing. One, you write what you know, and all I really know is myself. So each of those characters has a bit of me, a strong bit of me in it. And the bit of me that she's got in spades, and it probably was my starting point, was her Catholic self-sacrifice. Now, I don't particularly think it's a very good thing to have, but I had it, and I gave it to Mary, and that's why she is a bit downtrodden. I mean, she also, you know, happens to get pregnant, and if you did that in 1964, your fate was kind of sealed if you were a Catholic. Now, what happens to her after that is the story of England. It's the story of women in England up to a point. Others have done it better, I know that, but my attempt at it is that through politics, through the bad old Labour Party, she actually got a voice and a new world to live in that was bigger than her family and bigger than her love for her children and much bigger than her love for Tosca. But she's always stuck with needing to be the emotional center of the family. Now, there are women who would say you don't have to write women like that, I know. However, it's not untrue. And if it's part of the male gaze, then so be it. You know, that's how I see it, because that's what my mother was like, and that's what my sisters are like, and it's generational, you know. So and clearly a lot of people connected with it, and of course Gina played the part magnificently. It's almost seamless, actually, the way she grows. So sometimes you look at what she's doing in episode 9, and you think, was that really her running into the park in episode 1 with Tosca? Really? Was that really her who didn't know what dope was and didn't know what a tutorial was? You know, quite a journey. But they all have that kind of journey.
Eddie remained loyal to the party even when it expelled him. He may not be sober or logical, but he's steadfast. Who exactly are you to criticise loyalty in others, eh? You've stood by and watched me drown in the problems of this job, and you've given me nothing. Why? Why? Stop walking away from me. Nikki, please, don't walk away from me. If you're gonna walk, then walk. Keep walking. Just keep walking.
What does that mean?
Hello, thanks to the BFI for hosting this 25-year anniversary of Our Friends in the North. I still feel very lucky to have been part of this production, which was special in so many ways, and I'll be forever grateful to the team and to you, Charlie and Peter. Your determination and talent ensured not only the creation, but also the longevity of this remarkable series. Thank you. See you.
Well, let's talk about the Geordie's arc, because one of the most moving tragedies in the drama is the gradual decline of Geordie. I mean, when Nicky discovers him living on the streets of London as an alcoholic, it's an incredibly poignant moment. And there's a real sense that this could have happened to any of the characters, really, with a minor change in luck or circumstance. That I think that certainly, and it continues to resonate as well with rising homelessness and poverty today, doesn't it?
I think that's true. I think what propels his journey, if I go back to the beginning for him, was the need for a decent father. I mean, if you analyze what he does, he spends his entire screen time trying to find a better dad to sign up to. I mean, occasionally it's Nicky, occasionally it's Benny Barrett. What a terrible mistake, you know. And then when he's demoralized by Barrett and he loses Nicky again, who again goes to work in an election in episode 6 and hasn't really got the time for him anymore. Then we don't see Geordie for an episode and a half. And the next time we see him, and it's never explained, he's homeless and on the streets. But thank God no producer, thank you, Charlie, ever said, you'll need to explain that to the audience, because that's the kind of note I hate getting, you know.
Geordie, it's Nicky. Come with me, Geordie. Come on.
You want to stay with me, don't you, Geordie?
You can come. She can come. Come on, Geordie.
Nicky.
Geordie, come on. Come on.
Hey, leave him alone! Leave him alone! Leave him alone! Leave him alone!
I just want to help. You don't need money, you need somewhere to stay.
Come on, Geordie, I don't like him.
Okay. You can have some money. No! Don't spend it on booze.
No, we won't. We'll spend it sensibly, won't we, Geordie?
I'll come back tomorrow morning. Here, yeah? If you're here, there'll be more money. Okay?
I'll make sure he's here.
I was going to go on to fathers and sons, because Christopher, you brought that up before. I mean, Nicky has trouble liking himself. The years progress, and this stems pretty much from his troubled relationship with his father. I mean, is that something that many men deal with, do you think? Because it's quite universal, though.
Well, certainly, I would say men of myself, Peter and Charlie's generation. My own father was a product of the working classes, and he was sparing with his affection, deep of his passion, but sparing with his affection. And I would say everything I've done, I'm getting very emotional about it, was really, there's a great theatre director called Peter Gill, and he said, you need to decide whether you act for your mother or your father. Said to a group of students once. And I thought, well, I think I do it for my dad, but not for, but to get my dad's attention. Because that was mum's love was always there and expressed, dad's was not. And there is a parallel with Nicky and Geordie in that search for the father. And I have to say that I remember with Frida, the lovely Frida Dowie and Peter Vaughan, both now gone, the day we shot the scene where we dropped Felix at the home and the guilt of the mother, I then lived that.
I put quite a batch of these in during the autumn, so to make sure that I've got plenty for next year.
You've run them out, what, about early June?
Well, yes, late May, early June. first into water, then into hormone lutein, the hormone lutein kicks the stem, then I got that filled with pink sap.
Ta-ra, Felix.
We could put
Nice cup of tea, Pet.
In about 45 minutes. I've unpacked these things for her, so you won't be needing this.
They don't need any heat in astrology. Every time in a close triangle between this, with the temperature it is, they soon form their root in 3 weeks time, and form their root.
Oh, your hands are free. That's lovely. Yes, you can shake it.
I remember on the day acting it, thinking, could this happen to me? And it did. Precisely that. I went with my mother to a home in Salford and we dropped my father off. And my mother says to this day, the worst day of my life was not when your father died. It was when I put him in that home. And I have to say, look, you didn't put him in that home. She cared for him for 12 years, for 11 years. And the last year she couldn't do it because her own life. We dealt with it in the series. And of course, dementia now and care homes.
Yeah.
Yes, I had exactly the same reaction when I watched it compared to when I watched it 25 years ago. I now have a parent with dementia, and I saw it in a very different way. And I think, Charlie, there are so many universal themes in this, aren't there? I mean, and friendship is one of them. That's the beating heart of this drama, isn't it? Is the connections that we make through our lives.
I think that's right, and the kind of that sort of the sort of connections and that connective tissue that one makes with people in your formative years, in your young years, that in some shape or form never leaves you, and never quite left these four friends as well, which is the thing I think Peter recognized so beautifully in that kind of, significant scene in the final episode when they're there together again. And I think that you really feel their shared experience and their shared history. And sort of without being trite, I think that's sort of what the audience, responded to that, but also responded, because our audience were all in their 20s and 30s, they all responded somehow to looking at that shared political history through the course of watching the show, But
what's extraordinary about that scene you mentioned, that famous scene where the four friends find themselves alone together, is they don't say anything. So Peter, you 30 years of friendship are encapsulated in just the way they look at each other. And did you instinctively know when you did that scene that the dialogue just wouldn't cut it? Let's just do it without dialogue.
Yeah, I knew there was nothing that they could say.
Got the band's coat.
If you start them talking, they'd never shut up, because there are the complexities in their relationships in that room are massive. Mary doesn't even like Geordie. I mean, they've hardly been in a scene together. She never liked him in episode 1. It's 3.5 friends, really. But she tolerates him because they both love Nikki. And, the triangle of Nikki and Mary and Tosca, where do you start? It's best just for everybody to go, yeah, that was our life.
But Peter also had the advantage of writing that script whilst we were shooting for all sorts of other reasons. So he had, that is great acting.
Yeah.
Those are 4 really great actors in a room together. You know, that makes me emotional. You know, that's not easy to do. You know, and those are 4 actors who committed themselves in an extraordinary way to the material, because we shot sequentially, more or less. So they were at the end of their journey as well at that point as artists.
And is it right that you had to entirely rewrite the last episode because you'd run out of money?
Yeah, it was the whole production was a complete mess up, really. I mean, how anyone tolerated it, I'll never know. But anyway, you know, we got through a couple of directors and burnt through money in a, you know, way that wasn't fantastic early on. And yeah, we did ask Peter to reimagine the final episode.
No, it was the first. Oh, yeah, but the first episode was entirely rewritten, if you remember, and we did it during the holiday break.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
because we had to get rid of it. It was just so poor, really.
Yes, because I remember reading that originally the last episode had this, you know, it was very large scale with loads of extras and everything. And so actually, it was probably serendipity.
Newcastle was burning. It was a riot. Yeah, it became about a small boy stealing a car.
That's right.
And we're better for it.
Yes.
Actually, on that point, did you use real events like the miners' strike, like the police violence in the drama? Did you always intend that, or was that something that crept in as you went along?
I wanted. There were very few things I wanted to stop and just write about this, but the miners' strike was one of them. Partly because it was just going to involve, well, I thought, all of my main characters. I don't think I realized by then Geordie wasn't going to be around. He was shunted off to London and going to become homeless. I mean, I might have thought at one point, because he's an ex-miner himself, there would be a storyline in here. But clearly it was going to involve the other 3 in a major way, plus Tosca and Mary's son, who was in the police force. My brother was in the police force at the time there. So, I mean, I knew what was happening to them. And it seemed to me, of all the things, I mean, one could have written about the Troubles in Ireland and didn't. One could have written about the Falklands War and didn't. I wanted to write about the miners' strike partly because it would have fitted with the characters, and partly because I didn't think anything like the truth as it was experienced on the ground by the miners and by the communities around them and by the police themselves. I didn't think anything like the truth about that had been told at that time. We were at that point, 12 years or something after the strike had been and gone. And I did get quite a lot of letters about our friends in the North afterwards, but the one I got the most letters about was about the miners' strike, and it was from relatively young people saying, "Oh, I've got it now. I didn't understand for a minute what was going on there from watching news, but I have a different view and an appreciation of what went on because of our friends in the North." That means a lot to me.
Hey, for Christ's sake, man!
Jesus Christ.
The history lesson is important in something like Our Friends in the North if you're trying to write the history of the country that you've grown up in. So it's important that some people think they're getting something valuable out of it on that level, and that means sometimes it transcends being, you know, the posh soap opera, which I'm otherwise perfectly happy for it to be.
I mean, it strikes me as we're talking about the four characters that they all seem so real to us, and I wondered, Christopher, whether, you know, you ever imagined what happened to them after we left them in 1995, or what sort of lives they went on to have.
Yeah, I badger Peter about it all the time. I'm sure other people have badgered him about it, and also about Felix's pre-life because Peter Flannery has a connection to the Jarrow Marches. I don't think I could do that at the moment because at the grand old age of 57, I think I'd get too emotional to think about where Nicky Hutchinson is. I'd always come back to Mary. For me, I'd think, well, you know, he messed it up, didn't he? He fucked it up.
I think they'd be going to the shops together.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, thank you. I feel better now. No,
good.
I want to
carry a bag each.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they'll be at the bus stop together, like Felix and Florrie. You know.
Yeah.
You can't escape it. You can't escape it.
Mary would make me very happy.
Yeah, of course you would. She'd shout at you a bit though. Geordie would be dead, obviously. I mean, I kept saying to everybody, he dies 5 minutes after he crosses the Tyne Bridge. Wow. You know, he collapses from alcohol poisoning. I seriously tried to get Charlie to let me write and film a scene where he went to heaven and finally found his dad. You know, it's all I wanted to do for him. But I think Charlie thought that it was as stupid as an idea as it still sounds.
Yeah. And
what happens to Tosca?
He's in Monte Carlo avoiding his tax.
Yeah.
Huge yacht.
With a full.
With a full syrup.
So.
Yeah.
The empire's collapsed, and he's desperately trying not to pay that big pension bill.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or he might be running festivals. You never know. You know?
Yeah.
By asking all of you, do you feel it's time now for another Our Friends in the North, by which I mean a State of the Nation piece, charting Britain from the Blair Labour government of 97 through the millennium, austerity Britain under Osborne, and concluding with, you know, the rise of the right and Brexit, because it seems that, you know, that could be quite an epic drama. Let me start with you, Charlie. Is it time for this?
Well, look, I'd love to see it, and it would be great. And ever since Our Friends in the North, periodically, you know, I'm sure all of us, you know, you go into a commissioner's office and they say, what's the next great State of the Nation piece? As if it's something that, you know, you just sort of push a button on the computer and out they come. These are incredibly difficult things to write, I think. And, you know, as I think the conversation has shown today, in a way, you know, they're not just about kind of events that we followed in the news. They're about good drama, is about characters' personal interconnection with those events and what that means at a macro and a micro level to them. And, you know, there's a reason why you don't get lots of State of the Nation pieces, and it's not because people don't ask for them, it's because they're very difficult and they require real artistry. And so yeah, I'd love to see one, you know, but that will be dependent on meeting a writer as brilliant as Peter, you know.
Well, Peter, can you write another one?
I've written one, and the scripts are going into Sky Atlantic any day now, and it runs from 1971 to 2005. Doesn't quite do what you were suggesting. I doubt if they'll make it, but they might, you never know. But I don't think the sort of thing you're imagining probably will get done, because I don't think that's what people would be looking for now. I think they'll be looking at identity politics rather than what happened to the left and what happened to the right. I think the building blocks of the great national story in the way that I wrote it aren't recognized as such anymore. I don't think people are interested in that. Certainly the people who make TV aren't interested in that. What they're interested in is, for now, for the next 5 or 10 years, is entirely about identity politics. Now, maybe you can do and our friends in the North, and it's written through the prism of identity politics as opposed to the prism of class politics, which is mine. That's my prism. That's how I see the world. I don't know. Maybe there's a writer out there who can do it. It's not me. I'm still writing through class politics and those big issues of can government be bought, or will it remain free? And that's what I've written another one about. Maybe in 25 years' time. Oh, hang on. How old am I? No, we won't. We won't be sitting here talking about it.
Yeah, old Peter.
I'll be 93.
Christopher, would you like to see another kind of state of the nation piece along the lines of our friends in the North, covering the last 30 years?
Yes, I would. It'd be very interesting to see what the character division and profile would be. We had 3 men and just the one woman. Looking at that, I do remember in a very naive way talking to Nicola Schindler at the time, who was the script editor and I think an associate producer, I'm not sure. She's certainly doing very well for herself now. About a black Our Friends in the North, I remember saying that, I mean, there's a model here. There is a model here. If we looked at, you take it back to Windrush and then take it right back to take it to Stephen Lawrence and beyond, to Black Lives Matter, something like that. Yeah.
I'd watch that. That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Peter Flannery, Christopher Eccleston, and Charlie Pattinson, for shedding so much light on this remarkable series. I'm delighted to say that you can catch up with all of it on BritBox. Believe me, having just rewatched it all again, it never fails to inspire us to ask searching questions about how we live and our political system. I'm Kirsty Lang. This is BFI at Home discussion. If you've enjoyed it, please check out the site regularly because there are events being added all the time. And perhaps you might consider a small donation because the BFI is a charity, and details on how to donate appear on the screen shortly. Thank you and goodbye.